Substreams, Firehose, and what was the third one? I almost forgot, but maybe we can start with a short
Subgraphs.
introduction.
Sure.
Subgraphs, exactly. Maybe you can introduce us to your team, what Pinax is doing, and then give us an overview of the three products. Feel free to talk, Daniel.
Yeah, thank you. So yeah, Daniel Keys, I'm the CEO of Pinax. I have Denny, our CTO, on the call as well. We are the same team behind EOS Nation, block producer on Wax and other Antelope chains. The story of Pinax, I can just briefly share how that came about. So you're probably all familiar with Diffuse. We've been running that on Wax for many years now, losing track of time. It's been probably at least 5 years, running that on other chains like EOS. Diffuse is the indexing querying technology developed by formerly EOS Canada. They were a block producer on EOS, and now they're known as Streaming Fast. They a few years ago, they sort of pivoted. They got a large grant from the Graph. So if you're not familiar with the Graph, they're a big decentralized indexing protocol that supports multiple chains, and they've sort of established themselves as a standard in Web3 indexing technology. That they invented and developed a technology called subgraphs, and originally they started just for Ethereum, and since then they have been incorporating more and more chains. And through that process, they found that some of these more bigger, faster chains, and in particular, what triggered this move for Streaming Fast was BNB chain. The subgraph technology, as it wasn't able to keep up with the speed of transactions being written to subgraphs for, big high usage protocols like PancakeSwap on BNB. Streaming Fast, having developed Diffuse for a chain that was much faster, Wax and EOS, saw an opportunity that the core technology behind Diffuse, being Firehose, could handle that speed, and they basically they built a prototype and proved that they could feed data using Firehose and a new technology they built called Substreams into a subgraph for PancakeSwap on BNB, and they were successful in being able to keep up with that high throughput. And they got a big grant to join the Graph as a core developer, and they essentially abandoned Diffuse and the Antelope ecosystem, and we took over as the sole operator of Diffuse, and we've been continuing to run it ever since. But since then, a couple of years ago, they tapped on our shoulder to come join them on the Graph as kind of them being the primary developer team behind this technology, us being the primary operating team behind this technology. And since then, we've become core developers on the Graph. With what we've been focusing on is running this infrastructure for the Graph Foundation and for other subgraph developers on the Graph. And we've become the primary experts on operating Firehose substreams, and increasingly so subgraphs and new data services that we're building on top of this stack. So Diffuse is kind of this big monolithic. It does everything. It's extremely heavy. It's no longer being actively supported by the Streaming Fast team, so it's keeping up with all the upgrades to the network has been a challenge. And as these chains grow, it's becoming heavier and heavier because it's trying to do everything all at once. This new stack, Firehose Substreams, is much more modular. And instead of trying to do everything, you kind of build these little modules to only keep the data that people actually value. So it's more flexible, more modular. But unlike Diffuse, out of the box, Diffuse just does everything. With this new stack, we have to sort of develop these modules that meet the use cases of the users that need them. And recently, that's what we've done when we recently announced that we'll be sunsetting Diffuse on both EOS and Wax. I believe actually, we announced that it was going to be last Friday that we were shutting down Diffuse on Wax. It may still be up, but it'll be coming down very soon. But we worked through the use cases of all of our existing customers running Diffuse both on EOS and Wax, and developed these little smaller weight modules, which is, depending on the use case, leveraging a Firehose directly, leveraging a Substream, which is really just a way to filter. Firehose gives you all of the blockchain data streaming. It's the pipe out of the chain into this stack. A Substream is a way to sort of filter that data. You can build substreams using Rust. And then a subgraph is where you load that data and you have an index that you can query using GraphQL. We've also built the REST APIs that give you the full token transaction history. And we're building new data services like something we're calling data sets, which is targeted to data analysts, which is just taking raw blockchain data in Parquet files, putting them into an S3 bucket, and making it really easy for a data analyst to point their database to that and do whatever transformations and queries on that they like. So that's the high level view. I can pause if anyone has any questions and maybe let Denny go a little deeper, and maybe let's hear if there's any questions and we can target our depth towards those. Lisa.
Hi, I'm curious who your customers are.
Yeah, we've got, so the probably the most well-known one would be Wombat, and that's operating on Wax. On the EOS side, we've got guys like Upland. There are, not a huge amount of paying. We got, I think, 7 or 8 that are like in our enterprise customers, and otherwise everyone's using our free plan. But those are probably the 2 most well known.
We got a question in the chat about what would be the sort of features that we need to kind of complete. And most of it is those little modules that we're talking about. So Daniel was talking about the Diffuse does everything. So the indexes all the transactions, all the actions, has a really good indexing. Now, if you're removing all of this sort of rich, diffuse, full indexing, you need to build out these sort of new modules, more independently. So let's say a transaction module, a token module, whatever other module that you want. And once those modules are essentially built, then dApps can essentially reuse those modules. So right now we're going from full index the whole chain to now modular indexing, and only index what you actually want to care and what you're really willing to pay for. And that's the big difference, is essentially building out those transaction modules, token modules, whatever modules, maybe even an NFT module, right? An atomic asset module, because that has a sort of a defined smart contract. It has a different flow. So you can technically also build an NFT module. So that essentially is what is missing, is those sort of customized modules. So we're working on trying to go top up, going from whatever is the most used things that people want. One of the most demanded thing was transactions, right? They wanted to look up their transaction. Second part, I want to look up my tokens. And maybe the third will be NFT, and down the road, we'll have other modules that we build out. So those are the things that are missing, which we are in the process of developing.
Yeah, and we're happy to work with folks. So again, we work directly with all of the existing Diffuse customers to understand what are their use cases, and we develop the modules that meet those use cases. So we're happy to work with others. If you need a module built, we can either build it or provide guidance on building your own. This is a stack that you can run yourself, or we can host it. And again, depending on where on the stack, we can host it as a subgraph right on the Graph decentralized network, and we'll index that for you, and you can access it directly on the Graph. and now it's available for anybody else on the graph to query as well. But like Denny said, I think we've covered the 80 to 90% of the use cases that were valuable to Diffuse customers, and it's just a matter of now identifying and filling any gaps that still exist. I see Anders has a question about how difficult it is to replay a module from block one, and I would say at a high level, it depends on the module. What are you trying to index there? The heavier the index, the longer it takes, but maybe Denny can speak to that in more detail.
Yeah, so we are currently doing some of those modules where we're syncing from Genesis. Now, it depends on how much data you're trying to load into these sort of custom, subgraphs or whatnot. But if you're trying to load the entire chain of Wax, all the transactions from Genesis, it will take a while, right? And you're just loading a lot of data. But if you've got a customized smart contract that you really know, okay, this is my contract, these are only the transactions, maybe your smart contract is deployed at block 100 million, and you narrow down your indexing to only the smart contract that you care about, will say your game or your tokens, then it would actually go quite fast because it ignores blocks that don't contain transactions that you are not indexing. Now, if you're trying to do the entire chain, you're talking about billions of transactions, billions of actions. That will be a long time, and that might not be, subgraphs might not be the solution for trying to index, a mass contract. The other thing too is, let's say if you are trying to index a lot of data, you're trying to index all the database operations or all the actions of the chain, what you can do is you can prune, so it's called pruning, you can prune to the latest 14 days or the latest 7 days. So you can have a highly indexed, lots of data, but only for the last 7 days. And most users that we've been asking about only really need the last 14 days, the last 7, or maybe not the last day. You can actually customize your subgraph to have a pruning option so that it can be very data rich, very robust, but only for a short period of time. And that will kind of solve that short-term history. If you want long-term history, maybe there's a different solution, which we can maybe dive into another call. But we have other sort of more historical solutions, and then you have the live data solutions. So syncing from Genesis depends on the subgraph, depends on how much data you're trying to load. But if you're trying to load a single smart contract, you could actually do it. It won't be that hard. It will still take some hours or maybe a couple days to sync, but it's definitely doable. If you're trying to sync Farmer's World or Alien Worlds, I mean, this is a different beast of level of transaction, right? It depends on how much data you want to store. So, but everything is possible.
We do have an Aliens World subgraph that we indexed. So is that the full Alien Worlds history? Yep. And do you recall how long that took to sync?
So again, we're doing the pruning option because I just know that we're not going to be able to sync from Genesis or from the first block. So we are offering 3 different subgraphs for Wax at the moment. So we're doing all the transaction, all the database operations, everything. So we have it's called a Wax transaction. But maybe Daniel, do you want to look that up? Maybe we can do a demo quickly.
Yeah.
Feel free to share your screen.
Continue while I look it up.
Yeah, so what we wanted to do, and we wanted to kind of prove and get this test case to see what if we did index Farmer's World, Alien Worlds, all of Wax transaction, would this tech stack be able to keep up? Because there's a lot of transactions on Wax. I mean, we all know you're looking at the Wax transaction, it's a really heavy chain. And we want to see, does this subgraph technology, can it keep up, right? Can it keep up at least to the live chain? But with the proper pruning and the proper sort of, we're not going to be able to store the whole entire chain using a subgraph, but we could do the last 14 days. So these subgraphs that we have deployed, if you type Wax, or maybe, so if you go to the graph, there's a graph explorer. So what will happen is there'll be lots and lots of different subgraphs available. Right now we were filtering on Wax, but you can also look up, this is also include all the EVM and Solana. alien worlds, farmers world. Yeah. So you've got all the different subgraphs that you can deploy. And we added a little logo so you can kind of identify it. But if we go to Wax transaction, okay. On the left, you're going to have the GraphQL interface. Now, usually developers, once they set up their GraphQL, it would be like a JavaScript code or whatever they're trying to connect it. This is just a little GUI, so you can kind of test to see, some trial GraphQL. And then if you want to go to the About page, I've got an example that we can kind of, and there should be a GitHub URL.
This one here?
Yeah. So mostly what you can do is you can add a metadata, and this will allow you to give you the source code. Of course, if you're trying to build a private subgraph for whatever reason, you could hide your code, but you can also say, hey, here's the source code, so you can replicate that. You can have other people build out a subgraph. So we've got an example here, a little GraphQL example, where we are looking through actions. We were going to remove notifications. That's essentially having extra receivers. And we're going to order it by block. Test that out. And we're also going to look at the database operations. You can see there's a lot of data that's going to come out because you've got action, database operations, JSON data, which is decoded, transaction ID, block number, timestamp. And let's see. And we're only filtering. We could technically remove account USIO token, but right now we're also filtering on a specific account. But for the demo, let's just play that.
Let's just hit play.
Yeah. And let's see. Okay, great. So now we've got all the actions, and nested inside, you also have the database operations. So a typical token transfer will have the balance changes. So if you've got and maybe I think we can put in database. Oh yeah, new data JSON. Yeah, it should be there. So whenever you're doing a token transfer, you've got your previous balance, and then your the sender and the receiver will have balance changes. So in this query, we're actually indexing all the actions, the database operations, and that's usually what people are looking for is actions, database operations, and transaction IDs. Order it by the last block number, and I will sync my database based on these results. So you can look into deposits, exchanges, casinos, all sorts of things. That would be kind of useful to know what are the latest deposits onto my account. So that's pretty much the GraphQL interface where you can kind of query the data. Now we've shown that we have also Farmers World, Alien Worlds. What you can do is we've filtered out. We have filtered subgraphs that only index specific smart contracts. Now for this Wax transaction, we're doing everything, all the contracts. It does sometimes, depending on the chain, if there's a lot of transactions that day, it can kind of take a few blocks to sync. So sometimes it kind of drifts a little bit. But we're going to work on performance, so there's subgraph performance and Postgres improvements, and there's all sorts of tuning as an operator to make the performance go better. Same thing with being a block producer on Wax. There's a lot of things you can do as a block producer to fine tune your producing node. So it's the same thing for subgraph operators. There's a lot of work on the operator to make sure that you're properly set up, and you've got a sharded Postgres database, and you've got dedicated hardware for the syncing. But we can probably have help out operators to get into the performance of hosting these subgraphs.
Yeah, so we're currently the only indexer who has indexed this subgraph. Again, the graph being a decentralized network, there are incentives for, there's hundreds, thousands of indexers who can pick up this subgraph and start indexing it and get rewarded from query fees. You'll see that there is this little warning here. This subgraph uses features and networks that aren't supported yet. No indexing rewards. So the graph has this inflation, just like with block producers on Wax who earn inflation indexers on the graph can earn inflation by indexing subgraphs. The WAX network hasn't gone through the governance process on the graph yet to enable inflation for subgraphs on WAX. So if you're an indexer, you would not be earning that inflation portion of the reward, but you would earn query fees. Anyone who's actually making queries and paying to query a subgraph, you would earn that. And for now, we're sort of subsidizing, we've decided to, even without those indexing rewards, we're going to be indexing on WAX and hopefully working towards getting WAX to get that full support so that we can incentivize more indexers to make this more robust.
And one more thing I want to kind of show is maybe if you want to go to the Alien Worlds subgraph. So right now we have like these when we talked about these modules. So this is like the WAX transaction, or it's actually the Antelope transaction subgraph, so that it's Antelope chain agnostic. And what we can do is once we have these sort of chain agnostic modules, and then we have these applications that are also chain agnostic, we can eventually, if we go to the about, and then there's a GitHub repo, you can then essentially take this chain agnostic subgraph and then apply a filter. And then if you go up, so right now we have a list of smart contracts. So we have, let's say, this WAX transaction subgraph, which is a generic subgraph that anybody can use. And now we say, I want this module, but only on these smart contracts. So we list all the smart contracts that we want to get notified on. And then if you go up to the code part, there's a subgraph YAML, I think it's right at the bottom. You can put in, and then there's a line called params. I know it's not that technical. This is a one-liner. So we have this Antelope transaction module, which then uses the parameters to filter on a particular contract. So now we're saying, hey, these are all the Alien World smart contracts. I only want to filter on these. And then the subgraph will be filtered based on your requirements. And you don't have to do any coding. You just have to know which contracts you want to filter on. You can take these modules and then you can load it into your, you can deploy your own subgraph with a custom filter on your particular use case. Now, so we're going to build out, Antelope transaction, Antelope tokens, Antelope NFTs, and then people can just pick up these, pre-built modules, filter it on their smart contract or their NFT collection, and it should technically be able to work. And then it's a highly filtered subgraph with their project. And so that's what we're kind of doing and targeting with these sort of sub-modules of applications. Now you can also build out your own custom subgraph and build out a custom alien world with all the very, more detailed, but this is kind of using these pre-built modules. So we're really trying to make it so it's really easy for developers to deploy their own subgraphs by modifying this one single line params. So I think that's all I wanted to kind of share. It was just it's pretty easy to deploy custom subgraphs using these modules. And let's look at if there's anything in the chat. I don't know how. I think there was a talk about billing.
Yeah, billing. So if you're querying on the graph directly, you can just pay directly with the GRT token, or they've also have a way to they've abstracted pay with credit card, subscribe. You get they have a free tier. So probably for a lot of the users on WAX, they would not even need to pay. I think it's something like 100,000 queries you get in the free tier. Once you go over 100,000 queries, it's like a few dollars for every 100,000 queries. And like I said, they do have ways you can just pay with credit card, or you can pay with the GRT token. We've also made this so we've got our own Pinax hosted service where you can go to pinax.network, log in, create an API key, and we've sort of wrapped our stuff around the graph, and you can just access it that way. For the subgraphs, that you have to have a conversation with us, and we can get you access that way. But we're hoping that we can get sort of more the broader community. We have some of our enterprise customers accessing these services that way. But we're hoping that the broader community would be happy just going directly to the graph, and again, over time we'll have more and more support for the graph and more subgraphs, and we'll have the graph sort of playing nice with the broader Web3 community with this standard that's developed there.
I think there's a question about, can you also filter on action names? So if you want to go to the other tab, the Antelope transaction subgraph, the middle one, yeah. And if you just go down a bit, I think I added some instructions. Oh. So, I got music in the background.
We can't hear it.
Oh, you can't hear it? Okay, good. Oh, sorry. So right now what we have is we actually have a pretty standard way to kind of define these parameters and these filtering. So if you wanted to, it does an and, or you can do a combination. You can also filter by authority. So if you have I only want to filter on my account, my account at active permission, you can do that. So you can filter all the available queries that you can filter on is action, code, receiver, authority, so off. If you want it to be, a top level action, so not a derived action that is called by a smart contract. You want it to be an action that is triggered by the user, not the smart contract. So you can do input equals true. And you can also filter by data as well. So if you have a data from, so let's say if you're doing a token transfer, you have two or a few columns. You have from, to, a quantity, and memo. You could technically filter on a memo if you want to. So your daily staking rewards or BP claim rewards or whatnot. So you can apply filters based on data inputs of actions, table names. There's a list like this. So you can either filter by all of these options. So right now, code was one of the examples because that's kind of, you want to group it by the smart contracts, but there's a lot of other options that you can do as well. And we could always add more. There's more filters that we could add, but I think those are kind of the top level filters that most developers will kind of want. And then the bottom it says you can do and or operations with brackets as well. So this follows the same kind of syntax that Diffuse had a little bit. So if you're familiar with how Diffuse did their filtering, it's very similar. Actually, it's almost the same as what Diffuse has. Hopefully that answers that question. And hopefully these READMEs are helpful enough to help the developers, go through and understand. If there's missing something, I can add it in the README, and that way everybody has access to that information and then reference.
And if you want to participate as an indexer, help again decentralize this more so that we're not the only ones. There are to operate as an indexer on the graph, there is a staking requirement. So to spin up a new indexer, you need to stake to your own indexer 100,000 GRT. GRT is 17 cents, so that's about $17,000 you would need to stake. However, this is also open source. It is possible to run, just run it yourself as a hosted service, not on the network. Or again, we're already indexing. So if you have a subgraph that you want to make available on the graph network, and you don't want to have to, stake to your own index or index it yourself, we're more than happy to. You just reach out to us, and we can index your subgraph for you if you've built the subgraph that you want to have made available on the graph network.
Great. What's a good way to contact you?
You can hit me up on Telegram. You can join our Discord channel. So we've got a Pinax public Discord channel. You could find us on our website. So you can find, we have a contact form there and links to all of our Discord and all that stuff right from here. yeah, and we got, like I said, contact us form. Here's all the different ways you can reach us.
Wonderful.
And yeah,
well,
feel free. Again, like I said, we are multi-chain. We support, not just Wax, but a whole bunch. You can see all the chains we support, all the data services. You can find more details on them, and lots of content on our blog. We have a blog post that might be useful for this community here. Where is it here? There we go. This is kind of the general article targeted to diffuse users on how to migrate your diffuse services to this new stack. I'll drop the link to that in the chat because it's relevant.
Cool. People seem to love EOSQ. Any plans to rebuild EOSQ to support the subgraphs?
Yeah, good question. We don't have any immediate plans. That question has come up quite a bit. I have heard that there are others in the ecosystem that are maybe building it. It is possible. It's just not currently. It will take some work and not currently a top priority for us to get EOSQ running on this stack.
Thanks, Dan.
Yeah, no problem. Yeah, thanks a lot for the thorough introduction of your product. Any other questions from the participants today?
Hey, Dan, interesting. As an indexer, what are you indexing that picks up most of the use of your data?
In terms of query fees, so there's just two ways to get rewarded as an indexer on the graph. It's query fees and the indexing rewards, which is the inflation. Currently, the indexing rewards, the inflation is the majority of the rewards you earn as an indexer. And in terms of are there any specific subgraphs or networks that we index? I don't have a good answer. I don't know if Denny does. Maybe for another call, we can have Hao, who's he's the one operating our indexer and optimizing that side of things. He could probably be able to answer that question better, but maybe Denny has an idea.
Well, I think one of the things is, let's say specifically for Wax, it would be to, create that subgraph demand, create that indexing community, and eventually, then those inflation rewards will actually come onto Wax, only because there's usage, there's indexers, there's a community, there's developers. So I think that's one of the things that the graph is looking for, is if we allow this inflation to be added to the network, is there demand, right? So Wax actually has the demand, right? It has the developer community, it has the devs, it has the infrastructure. So I think Wax is in a really great position to kind of make that case to, hey, let's add inflation, like GRT inflation, to Wax, and that way you as an indexer can get paid to offer these services, and also maybe has some incentives from the Wax chain. Whereas a lot of networks, maybe some might not have as much usage or as much demand. So there's a mix of inflation rewards and also a mix of query fees. So you can get paid if there's a lot of people querying your subgraphs. But the majority right now, if you're an indexer, the majority of the revenue is really coming from those inflation rewards, essentially a subsidy from the graph ecosystem to sponsor these chains. Yeah. And then hopefully the idea is that these query fees, ramp up, and there's more and more usage, so that eventually the query fees kind of get balanced out versus the inflation. But at the moment, it's more inflation.
Yeah. So the way you earn those inflation rewards is it's again very similar to Wax, where you get people delegate to you. So the more delegation you have, it's a combination of how much you have delegated and the subgraphs usage. So you can see, you offer an APY, so a cut of your rewards to your delegators, and You can see we've got 29 million GRT delegated to our indexer. And there is a, what is it, a 16x, Denny?
Yeah.
So
Yeah, so it's a 16x. So essentially anything that you stake. So let's say you stake 100,000 GRT. It's a 16x multiplier of how much delegation room you have available. And after that, nobody essentially can stake to you, or you can kind of get a penalty on those rewards. So right now, like our capacity is 37 million because we have where's the self-stake?
we have 2.3 million self-staked.
And then times 16 should be that number.
So we have 7.5 million available if someone wants to delegate to us. So we monitor that and see, do we need to stake more, make more room, which increases your opportunity to earn those delegation rewards.
Yeah, and the graph has these delegation parameters, which is the cut, right? The how much out of this delegation do I want to keep as an indexer? So right now we hover about 10%, which is essentially all the rewards that we receive. 10% stays to us, and then 90% goes to the delegators. Now you can modify this. You can say, I want to keep all 100% of all the rewards because I don't have a lot of delegators. And then you're essentially just earning from 100% of all the rewards, but then you might not have a lot of delegating capacity from other. The other thing too that we have configured the query fee, we keep 100% because that's really our operations, and then the indexing rewards is what we give out. So you can also do that configuration, or you can do 50-50. So all of these sort of reward splits as an indexer to delegator are configured in the protocol itself. So you don't have to do any backdoor deals for that split. It's already baked into the protocol, which is a really nice feature.
Where do we do backward deals? What are you talking about?
I didn't say anything. I didn't say anything.
So when you're indexing, indexing is not storing of the data.
It is.
Okay. So that's your Postgres database. Terabytes and terabytes of. Okay. So what's the difference between the indexing and the queries then?
So the queries are just like so there's two parts. There's the indexing of the data, and then there's you serving that data for queries. So you're going to have a query node and an indexing node, or you can have it all in the same machine. But normally you'll have a subgraph, you'll have your Postgres database that will be indexing, and then you're going to also serve those GraphQL queries. So the graph has a gateway, and it will route based on who has availability. And
you can't have one or the other, right? You need both of them. Is what I'm saying.
You do need both.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. You do need both. And also you need to kind of broadcast, hey, these are my subgraphs that I'm syncing. So that way the gateway, right, the sort of the gateway that does all the query routing will know which subgraph you are supporting. And they also do like performance routing. So if you're an indexer that has a poor performance, or you're shut down, or you're getting a 404, the gateway will kind of know that, and it will kind of stop routing to your endpoint. Because,
latency. So geographic, if someone's making query who's geographically located closer to you, you have a higher chance of serving that query.
Yeah, okay, I get it. I was curious on that for space concerns. Preempting this meeting, I was reading through the documentation, and they were saying that the indexer, you can have a large indexer, which is basically all of the ERC20 tokens on Ethereum. And I think they said it was a lot of RAM, and you did like 256 gigs of RAM or something, but it was like 4 terabytes. That'll see you. I mean, surely it's not that small, right?
Well, and as an indexer, you get to pick what you want to index. So whenever you join as an indexer, you don't need to go and sync every single subgraph under the moon. You get to pick, hey, I want to index this one because I think this one is the most profitable for me as an indexer.
Use.
I like Alien World. I'm going to sync this one because I think that one has the most chances of earning me rewards, and based on reward ratio.
The documentation was more. It was saying, oh, okay, just 4 terabytes, you can have it all, right? And that was that seemed like way too low.
Yeah, well, we're not doing that, but yeah, we pick and choose which we want to reward, because eventually you're going to do the math and you're like, hey, this one doesn't make sense. It's too big. I don't really get a lot of rewards. I'm going to drop this one because it's not worth it. So you can do that as an indexer. You can just pick and choose. You can say, I only want to do wax. I don't want to do the other chains. You can do that as well. Yeah.
And you need to basically, of all the GRT you have delegated to, you allocate, the way you have to allocate the pool of funds you have to the subgraphs you want to index. And you can see, we've got 166 subgraphs that we're indexing, and you can see which ones we've allocated to, and that sort of determines, I don't know exactly how the allocation translates to the rewards for a specific subgraph. Again, that's something that, if we want to get deeper into that stuff, we can have Hao join in a future call.
Okay, but you've got a significant investment in the hardware to run it, multiple Postgres instances and APIs and what have you. Right.
Yeah, I think if you want to do a really good job, yes. If you want to get started and experiment, you can do it with quite a minimal hardware requirement. So I think at the beginning, we actually was running everything on one single Postgres, not sharded. Everything is on a single node. The indexing is on that node. You can do a query node. But as you know, like whenever you spin up even a BP node, you could technically run everything on one, but then you'll overload that node. So as you get more and more subgraphs, more and more databases, you're gonna have a more elaborate setup. But you could start with single node, single instance, single Postgres, and kind of get started.
And 17 grand.
Yes, 17 grand in self-stake.
Unfortunately, yes.
I think is probably the biggest,
unfortunately,
barrier.
Yeah.
Is there a bug bounty if I break it? Can I offset that 17K by lighting your stuff
don't want maybe.
You don't want that.
Ask Ross. Yeah, there you go.
You do want him, but you don't want him at the same time.
Yes, I think the staking requirements will be the higher barrier of entry, not the hardware at the beginning. Yeah, but that's only if you want to join the network as an indexer. So we will be offering subgraph indexing on the graph initially as an indexer. So we'll try to have a process. If you are deploying a subgraph on Wax, we're going to have a process where we can say, okay, we'll sync the subgraph. So we need to figure out the incentive structure for that. And if any other indexer wants to join on the sort of Wax subgraph indexing capability, we'll need to coordinate with the Wax team how we end up doing that.
Okay, cool, great.
Ah, man, I'll slide up in your team.
You do need Firehose, so you do need that whole stack, right? The Firehose, Substream. So if you've got Firehose set up already for Wax, your half the battle is done, right?
I spun it down, but I did spin it up. I indexed the whole chain. I want to say it was like 14 terabytes of block logs for Wax, or whatever those files are called. I mean, it's definitely heavy for the whole chain. And I kept them because I was like, if I did all this work, I don't want to throw them away. Hopefully they're still valid. But it's different. Like say the managing of, I'll say this is my experience of it. The managing of a DeepMind node is different. There's a reason those EOS Nation snapshots snap every 3 hours. And why Matthew was so meticulous about those snapshots and the different versions and the timing. It has to do with the replaying and recovery and the way DeepMind works. So once you get used to it, I mean, it's no more cryptic and archaic than Hyperion, and it's super stack of everything. But it is a little different how the node itself actually runs. But once you get it going and understand it goes. But you do pretty much work with snapshots. It's almost like TempFS. Hey, if something goes wonky, you're going to be rolling back to a snapshot and letting it march forward happily. Normally, my poor man's opinion of it.
Sounds good. And Anders, thank you for all the questions. You've been really very active in the chat. So I think Daniel replied on the.
Yeah, I dropped the link to the chain integration process docs on the graph. A lot of the technical stuff we've already done. Then the next step is kind of going through the governance process. There's like a forum post that we would need, and we can help go through this. We're involved in that chain integration process, so we could guide and hopefully help expedite this. But there is a post to forum post. There's going to need to be testing done and a minimum number of indexers that are indexing the subgraph. So I don't think it'll pass with having currently Pinax being the sole indexer indexing subgraphs for wax. I think they're going to want to see at least a few. I see Michael volunteering, which is great.
It's a blessing in disguise, I'm telling you. Matthew's going to cuss you for accepting my invitation.
and then so it goes through a governance process, and then inflation gets enabled. But in the meantime, it works. You can go already start querying. You can find these subgraphs on the Explorer, and you can query them.
Yeah, that's a great part with the sort of the decentralized graph network now is these are all optional requirements to actually deploy Wax. So Wax is operational. We can sync subgraphs on Wax. You just can't get those that inflation reward and so that prestige inflation reward. But it does work, so it's not a blocker. So we can still test. Developers can deploy subgraphs. Indexers can sync. So yeah, there's nothing blocking right now for testing and trying out these subgraphs on Wax.
Yeah, and the inflation rewards are important to incentivize indexers to index those subgraphs. But in the meantime, we've got Pinax who is committed to, hey, any Wax subgraphs, we'll index them. We're not worried about the index rewards. We'll go ahead and start indexing them. And so we have sort of and we have like we're sort of solving the lack of indexer incentives just by being that indexer to commit to having those indexed. So again, if we want more indexers to start indexing this stuff, that's when the inflation rewards are going to play a big part.
Excellent. Right.
Anything else? Good questions. Appreciate all the engagement. And again, feel free to reach out if you have any more questions and if you want to learn more about joining as an indexer.
Perfect, Anton.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. Any other questions? If not, I think that's a perfect end to an hour-long roundtable. Appreciate taking your time and giving us a thorough overview.
Yeah, happy to do it.
Cheers, guys.
Have a great day, everyone.
Bye.
Good night. Big time.
Bye, and Dennis. And all the others. We're meeting again on Thursday, marketing business roundtable, but we are mixing in the version 6 guidelines introduction on Thursday. Going to announce it, so please be there and get to know what the version 6 guidelines and the modified timeline for reporting and voting will look like. Other than that, wish you all a great week.